Hello there, this is Timothy Carroll from Carroll Consultancy Group, and we are with the esteemed osteopath and naturopath, Matt Walden, today, looking at the 6 principles of health, and we're up to number 5, which is drink right. So I'm super interested on drinking right. Obviously, we're not talking about alcohol, Matt.
Well, it's a good point actually, because alcohol is drunk in most cultures around the world, and it does potentially have some kind of function, you know. So if you look at alcohol purely biochemically, then you would probably say, on balance, it's just not a good thing to consume, But when you look at it as, or you look at human health, let's say, is not just a biochemical thing, but also an emotional and social thing, and then there's a biomechanical element as well. Well, then, socially, clearly, alcohol helps people to relax a little bit, helps them to unwind and so on. So it does have some benefits. But if you're going to be drinking alcohol, what you really want is to be in a really good, healthy status before you start poisoning the system, right? So then the body can handle a few toxins. But if you're already quite toxic because you're not eating organic foods and you're not well hydrated, and perhaps you use a lot of kind of commercial chemicals in the home or whatever, smoker, etc. So, there's lots of ways we can get chemicals into our system to stress the liver. If you then add stress onto that stress, that's really not going to be good for most people. But if you're eating clean and you're staying hydrated and you're using non-toxic chemicals in and around the home, and then you have a bit of alcohol, especially if it's organic alcohol, well, then so much the better. So it's that's obviously a personal decision. But when we talk about drinking right, we're really talking about hydration and staying hydrated. And it really stems from the earliest life forms were in the water, so they lived in the water. And then, of course, at a certain stage in evolution, you see life forms move out of water onto the lands. And so what we've had to do is to essentially carry the seawater within us. So whereas before we were immersed in the seawater, now we have to hold kind of saline water within us. And so we've got a number of mechanisms by which we do that. And so drinking right actually involves getting enough salt as well, interesting enough. So salt has been portrayed quite negatively in the media and in medicine actually for many years, and quite rightly so in some ways, but it's really important to understand why it's been negatively portrayed. And the reason is that salt is typically used as a flavor enhancer, and therefore it's used typically in commercial foods in very high proportions. And it's the sodium and the chloride of salt that gives the flavor enhancement. So being as clever as we are, we removed all of the other minerals that you would get in a natural sea salt or a natural rock salt to just leave the sodium and the chloride. And so first of all, that creates a mineral imbalance, because there's about 70 or 80 minerals that we should be taking in through the diet. And indeed, most of them are found in natural sea salts and in natural rock salts, like Himalayan rock salt, for example. But sodium and chloride on their own, if you keep consuming them, they become somewhat toxic, just like anything else when it's out of balance. Too much sugar, too much alcohol, too much whatever, it's not good. But if you have it in the right balance, then your body can tolerate it, and in fact it probably does you some good. So it's the salt that actually holds the fluids in the tissues. So you could drink like a kind of reverse osmosis water which has got no minerals in it, all day long, and you're not going to retain that in your tissues if you're on a low sodium diet. So what is ideal is to have liberal amounts of salt with your food, particularly from lunchtime onwards, because what it does is it helps to clear cortisol from your system. So salt actually clears cortisol from the bloodstream, and that helps you to wind down. And that's often why you crave salty snacks in the evening, or when you're a bit stressed out, is that salt will help you to calm down and to relax a little bit. So if we naturally salt our food at dinner time or at lunchtime, then we'll probably feel calmer going into the evenings, but we'll also be able to hold the fluids within the tissues that we do drink.
And to be clear, that is, not table salt, the high processed salt. We're talking rock salt, Himalayan salt, the healthy organic salts.
Mm-hmm. And the grayer it is, the better. So if you're looking at sea salt, if you're getting a bright white sea salt, that means it's got very few minerals in it. If you've got a kind of gray and slightly moist looking salt, which a lot of the Celtic sea salts look like that, then that shows it's got a lot of other minerals in it. So that's, and this is why, it's even used in our language that, is someone worth their salt, because people used to be paid in salt because it's so important to us, and the word salary actually comes from saline. So salary and saline are the same thing, same derivation. And so that's how much we valued salt in the past. And any animal, if you're a farmer, then there's always a salt block in the field, because the animals will want to walk to that point to get their mineral consumption. They know that it's good for them, instinctively.
But in this modern world, Matt, we're in now, hydration. You talked about hydration, obviously super important for elite athletes and professional athletes. Why is hydration so important to our health? I've heard it's one of the most important things that we can do to maintain our well-being, and without it, we are in big trouble. So how does that relate to us now that we're at home, now we're in a COVID world, now that we're stressed in different ways, what do we do to how do we know that we're hydrated, and how do we get hydrated?
Sure. So we'll start out with why it's important is that you've got about 100 billion biochemical reactions going on per second in the human body. And every single one of those chemical reactions is water dependent. So you need water for cellular function. Okay, so that's the first thing. Secondly, you might have heard that the body is about 60%, some people say up to 70% water. So we're largely made of water. And so then, a simplistic way of looking at that is, do you want to be like a stagnant pond or a flowing river? And so that's obviously philosophical in nature, but there's some truth behind that philosophy. But the interesting thing is that we're actually not 60 to 70% water. We're actually from a body weight perspective, we are, but that's because water molecules are tiny. And if you were to compare a water molecule to a protein molecule, which is huge, so we're made of a lot of protein as well. So when you actually calculate the number of molecules of water compared to the number of other molecules in the body, we're more than 99% water.
Incredible.
Okay? So we want to be essentially drinking high quality waters where possible. And in general, around the world, we're pretty lucky to be able to do that.
Name high quality waters? I think that's key.
Sure. So high quality waters are essentially good mineral waters with a high level of dissolved solids. So when you look on any mineral water, you find on the back, it will say something about the dissolved solids. And ideally, you want dissolved solids above 300 parts per million. Parts per million, I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Double check. Yeah. So something like Evian has that, to name a brand that people would be familiar with. I think Fuji water is another one. There's quite a few good mineral waters, but it doesn't mean that if it's less than 300 parts per million that you need to discard it. What you can do is you can add a little bit of sea salt into it, and that mineralizes the water. Good. Same if you have a filter or a reverse osmosis system in the home or in the business, you can just add a pinch of sea salt to the water and that will remineralize it. So that means that when you drink it, your cells will actually be able to imbibe it. And another element to why it's important to our functioning is that when your cells are dehydrated, just like when you're dehydrated, you imagine how you feel if you've had too much alcohol or if you've been out running and exercising on a hot summer's day, then you get that sense of fatigue and heaviness and headachy and this kind of thing. Well, that's how your cell feels when it's dehydrated. It doesn't want to do any work. Okay, and you've got 100 trillion cells that if they all don't want to do any work, then that's exactly how you feel, right? You're not going to perform to your optimal. Again, it sounds a little bit philosophical, but the research into it shows that when cells are hydrated, they are in an anabolic state. They are in a growth state. When cells are dehydrated, they're in a catabolic state. They're in a breakdown state, okay? So if you are someone who likes your coffee in the morning and likes your alcohol in the evening and thinks that water is for washing up with, but not for drinking, that was my dad's phrase. He was just say, "Oh, water's for washing up with." Then the point is your cells are going to get dehydrated and you are going to feel more sluggish. You're going to be in more of a catabolic or a tissue breakdown state, which means you don't repair so well. And so linking that into the current situation with COVID-19 and just immune health in general, immune health is highly dependent on hydration levels. And again, because it's all controlled at the cellular level, so when your immune cells are feeling sluggish and dehydrated, then again, they don't function as well either. So, hydration takes you into this more tissue repair, but also when you're in a tissue repair state, your immune system's facilitated. Yeah.
Right.
But when you're dehydrated, then you're in a tissue breakdown state, and that means the immune system's shut down. Yeah. So
excellent. So in regards to getting hydrated,
yes.
How do you recommend, like how much water should we be drinking? And how do we get hydrated? I think that's critical.
Sure. So this is where my Englishness is going to come in, because we still measure people in stones, generally speaking here, which is 14 pounds. So if you've got someone who's 10 stones, because it's easy maths, so 10 stones is 140 pounds. Okay, so that in kilograms, that'd be about 70 kilograms, right? Maybe just what would it be slightly under 70 kilograms, I think, maybe 65, something like that. So that person would need about 2 liters ideally per day of fresh water, assuming they're not exercising particularly hard, assuming it's a fairly standard day just of normal activity. If you're going out and running for an hour, you're going to have to increase your fluids intake. So what they say is that they say about 200 milliliters per stone of body weight. So as I say, 140 pounds, 10 stone, that would be 2 liters. Now, for someone like me, I'm 6'1". I'm probably closer to about 15 stone, so about just shy of 100 kilograms. So I'm going to need more like 3 liters, something like that. Okay. So essentially 3 of these. So that's a liter. Yeah.
And I think I heard someone for the Americans online that are listening, I think I heard that if you weigh 160 pounds, then you drink half your body weight in ounces of water.
That's right. That's right.
80 ounces. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Exactly.
Excellent. And how do we achieve that? Because we forget.
So that's where the old iPhones and countdown timers and that kind of thing are fantastic. So I get into a habit sometimes of not drinking so much. This is a natural thing. I think you have a focus for a while and it tails off. But so a nice way to sort of remind yourself is just to set the reminder on there to go off, the buzzer to go off every 30 minutes. And each time it buzzes, you just have another sip, and you'll get through something like that, in a couple of hours. And so then to drink 3 of those in a day, it's no big challenge. But if you don't have that reminder and you suddenly get to dinner time, you think, oh no, I've got to drink 3 of these. It's too much.
Yeah.
So having that reminder on, I think is a great way to and just instigate that kind of habit.
Just lastly is drinking with food, drinking without food. I've heard that drinking with food can kill the digestion. Is that a myth? Is that a myth, or is it true? Like when should we be drinking?
Yeah, ideally you don't want to drink too much with a meal. I think to have enough to, particularly eating relatively dry foods, to just sort of wet the palate a little bit is fine. But I wouldn't drink excessively with food, because it will dampen down the acidic response in the stomach. So the first line of defense, if you like, against bacterial infection or parasites or whatever is essentially the acidic environment in the stomach. Okay, so the stomach should be highly acidic. If you drink one of these just before you eat or with the first few mouthfuls, then of course water is going to dampen down the acidic response, and then parasites can make it through the gut into your intestine, and that's really not a good thing. And not even necessarily parasites, but food that's undigested can make it through. So you want to optimize the digestive process by minimizing fluids at meal times, but you certainly can have a little bit to drink, and it's recommended maybe sort of half an hour, 20 minutes before food is consumed. That's a great time to drink, because it just hydrates the system, which means that you are ready and primed to eat your dinner. the stomach, for example, produces 10 liters of fluids per day.
Wow.
So, 10 of these per day, just from the stomach itself. The appendix produces 2 liters, so 2 of these per day. And so that's not even including whatever else is being produced in the small intestine and in the rest of the colon and so on. So it gives you an idea. This is a good example of the whole kind of idea of the stagnant pond versus the flowing river. If you're producing that much fluid per day, do you want a high throughput, or do you just want to, rely on what you've got there already?
Got it. Yeah. One last thing, Matt, because I noticed that you're drinking out of a glass bottle, and I think this is an important point. Maybe you can talk about why you choose that. Yeah,
so I generally, I wouldn't say I always do, but I generally try to drink from glass bottles because of the xenoestrogens that derive from plastic. So when you drink from a plastic bottle, there will be some xenoestrogens, i.e. microscopic plastic particles. And xeno means foreign, and estrogen, of course, is the female hormone. So these are foreign female hormones, which are derived from chemicals and you can get them also in various, primarily in plastics, but in things like pesticides, in things like, of course, oral contraceptive pills, hormone replacement pills, that kind of thing. So you may not be taking those, or you may be taking them, but you can get those through the tap water. Particularly if you're in a city and drinking tap water, you will be getting a lot of reprocessed hormonal medication coming through the tap.
Lovely.
It's not too pleasant to think about, but that's why I would choose glass. Is that glass, of course, is storing the water without any kind of leaching of plastics into, or BPA, that kind of thing, into the water.
Excellent, mate. So in summary, we have hydration equals great health, top performance, and well-being. So essentially, and great immunity is the last thing that I was thinking. Yeah. So 3 super important points. We've talked a lot about water today. Obviously, one of the most important things for health and well-being.
It's pretty important for mental health as well. So that's something that we can talk about on our next one, because we're going to
do a whole different session about mental health.
Maybe
in our next session, we're going to be talking about the thinking side of things. So Think Right is our next session. Tune in for that. Thank you, Matt, for today. And we look forward to our next discussion about thinking right.
Yeah, that's a pleasure. All right. Thanks for inviting me.